Secretos con los Maestros. Dr. Dean Toriumi.
Okay, for me today, it is a real pleasure to have the big master in rhinoplasty, Dean Toriumi from Chicago with us for this event, Rhinoplasty with the Masters. Dean, welcome. Welcome to Colombia, welcome to Bogota, and welcome to the course given by Face and Nose Institute.
It's a pleasure to be here. You've done such a great job in the organization. You brought world-class faculty here, and the program is fantastic.
We have been, it's been 2 days that have been amazing. And I want to ask you a few questions on your philosophy over the years in rhinoplasty. And you started, people got to know you because of your structural approach. And there was this big book, very important book that came out in the 90s that I have, that you wrote with Calvin Johnson, talking about that structural approach. What do you think? Why was this so important for the rhinoplasty community globally then?
Well, at that point, open rhinoplasty wasn't really popular. It was something that was talked about at meetings, but it really wasn't mainstream. After that book, I think people started to catch on and see the potential upside to it. And so they started to perform external rhinoplasty.
And do you think, because people were doing like endonasal, very reductive surgeries, and then suddenly this thing kind of exploded and everybody was doing structural approach. Is that correct?
It is correct. It is correct. It was a game changer at that time.
And then you added like this extra little step of complexity in it. And you started speaking about rib grafts. And why don't you tell us a little bit what your philosophy was with rib grafts when you started doing that? Because when you started speaking about rib grafts, everybody was harvesting the ear to reconstruct the nose.
See, the problem is that when you do revision rhinoplasty, reconstructive rhinoplasty, congenital problems, you need grafting material, and you need something that's going to last the patient's lifetime. Unfortunately, ear cartilage just doesn't do it in a lot of cases. Now, we use ear for composite grafting for internal lining, but for the basic foundational structure of the nose, I found that the rib is the best, and it's the patient's rib, okay? Not cadaver rib, it's the patient's.
So I think that makes all the difference in the world, right?
Absolutely.
Now, with the rib and with all of those grafts, you started introducing terms that were new to a lot of people. You started talking about structuring a nasal tip, building up a foundation. Can you explain a little bit why that was so important for you?
Well, in my mind, the key to success in rhinoplasty is a stable base and good projection that lasts the patient's lifetime. That's not easy to do, particularly in some variant anatomic variants. And so you have to really stabilize the base. And that's why we use septal extension grafts. That's why in secondaries, we use rib cartilage for that, because that's the foundation of your repair. And if you have a stable foundation and you build upon that stable foundation, you're more likely to have a good long-term aesthetic and functional outcome.
Now, you know what I think is really interesting? Because suddenly you were like this, you were and still are the guru of structure rhinoplasty. And then suddenly people start talking about this weird new technique that was an oldie, that was like Maurice Caudle's techniques, and the push down and the let down. And they come out with this new name that was called preservation rhinoplasty. And suddenly at one of the meetings, Dean is talking about preservation rhinoplasty. Could you please explain what happened to you? Were you struck by lightning? What was the reason for you to start talking about this approach?
To be honest, I was 60 years old and I was 30 years into my practice. And I follow my patients long-term, and I saw changes in the upper 2/3 of the nose after patients with thin skin, in particular with short nasal bones, changes despite the placement of spreader grafts, saw changes in the mid-vault, irregularities of the bony vault. And things didn't get better over time in these patients. They got worse and they required revision surgery. And then Isaban was one of the leaders in this area when it was revitalized and became more popular again. And I listened to them speak during COVID, and it was a light went on. And it was if you can take a beautiful dorsal aesthetic line and you can just drop it down to reduce the dorsal hump and preserve the dorsal contours and not remove it and then try to reconstruct it, that made perfect sense to me. It was just a matter of the transition, because the transition is tricky for all of us. And so I had really good friends and teachers to help me through that process.
Okay, and I mean, if you were to give a younger person a recommendation, because today it's like everybody speaks about structural approaches. Everybody uses spreader grafts. And suddenly you're talking about preservation approaches, and people are saying, why would I want to change my technique if this is something I have been doing for 10, 15, 20 years and it seems to work fine?
Well, I would challenge those people to call their patients back at 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and really critically look at those patients. And you will see irregularities on the nasal dorsum. Now, are they terrible? Well, maybe not. But if you have an alternative where you can do something that's faster, and once you learn it, I believe easier, and not have to reconstruct the middle wall, and also have that additional cartilage to use as structure in the nasal tip if you want to do a hybrid approach, it makes perfect sense. Now, the transition part, you need to go to a cadaver lab and you need to do hands-on execution of these techniques so that you understand the philosophy, the principles, the dynamics of stretching a hump flat, so that you then understand what is happening to that hump. And if you understand that, you execute it yourself, you've read on it from all these people around the world who are really experts in it, then you will have a more seamless transition.
But you know something, knowing you, and I mean, I knew this was gonna happen. You were not gonna just take in a new approach and just use it and stay there. You have taken, because that's why Dean Toriumi is so important for rhinoplasty. You have taken the preservation approach and you have put it at a different level. You started here and now it's up here. Why don't you explain why? Why you were able to combine a lot of what you were doing 30 years ago with all of these new techniques to make your patients happier and with improved results?
So the key in my mind is taking the best of both philosophies, meaning preservation and structure, and merging them into a hybrid structural preservation rhinoplasty. And by doing that, you can use dorsal preservation for the upper 2/3 to manage the dorsal hump, and then you can use structure to stabilize the base and do all the things we normally do to manage the nasal tip. It's the best of both worlds. And then you have really good aesthetic and functional outcomes for the long term, but you also have a really nice smooth dorsum with nice dorsal aesthetic lines.
So basically, the final thing, I would recommend all of the new surgeons and the surgeons who are interested in doing this is, you mentioned one, cadaver labs. I think that's important. Going to meetings. But I mean, reading.
Yes, reading a good source. There are new sources out there, and Quality Medical Publishing has the 2-volume structural preservation rhinoplasty book. Aaron Cousins and myself, we put on a fresh cadaver course 3 days with Marina Medical in South Florida. And these are opportunities where you can learn everything you need to know, execute it on fresh cadaver specimens, and then go home and do it on your patients.
Exactly. So basically, the take-home message for people is study, 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 never give up, always look at new techniques. And I mean, one of the things that you said in your lecture today, follow your patients long-term.
Yes, because a 1 week, a 1 month, a 1 year, that's not long-term. I mean, I'm talking 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and you learn a lot about your patients, but you have to be critical and you have to understand that things aren't going to be perfect all the time, and that's okay. But learn from those mistakes so that you can become a better rhinoplasty surgeon.
Well, thank you, Dean. I mean, for me, you are the master of masters. It's like you always push me to become even, a better surgeon every time. And it's incredible. I mean, I think that is something that if all of us can put into practice, it will make us better rhinoplasty surgeons to better serve our patients. Thank you so much for this interview.
Well, thank you, Roxana. It was a pleasure.
Secretos con los maestros. Dr. Dean Toriumi.